Welcome in to Chicago Bears Now. I'm Harrison Graham, ready to answer all of your questions. So load them up, hashtag Bears or Super Chat, and we will answer as many of them as we possibly can. We got Paul Cotton saying, will Velus Jones be wide receiver 3 for us? That's where I've got him penciled in, but again, I think he's going to be more of an overall weapon, not just a pure receiver. But if he's third in receiving on the team and gives you some rushing stats as well, a good returner, I think that would be a great rookie season. Jaxo 23, let me take a sip here. What will the Bears get as a grade for the draft, since most of the national media has not talked about the Bears since they are not a contender? I gave it a B. Mel Kiper gave it a B-. I've seen all over the place. We've seen a lot of people like the Bears draft. I've seen some people not so much. The reality is with these grades, we're all projecting. We won't know for a couple years how this draft class is overall, but I think on paper it was above average because I think you found 2 starters with your first 2 picks. Dylan V, what does this mean for Dazz Newsome? Velus seems like his replacement. Look, Dazz Newsome needs to go into camp with a good attitude and say, hey, I'm here to compete. I'm here to show my worth. I liked him as a punt returner coming out of North Carolina as a speed weapon on offense. Didn't really find his way onto the field much last year, but he's got this full offseason to put the work in. Training camp, see if he can show what he's all about, prove to this new coaching staff what he can do. Sangray Kim, not one draft pick can help Bustin this year. Wide receiver group that was atrocious last year is worse. This regime clearly wants an excuse to move on from Bustin. Look, I disagree again, Sangray Kim, and we're clearly not going to agree on this at this point in time. But time will tell, and one of us will be right, and one of us will be wrong. B. Bega 18, should the Bears sign Quandale Dingle? I feel like this is a joke. Quandale Dingle. I'm going to look this up. Oh, here he is. I know nothing about him, but oh, this is a I see what you did here. You got me. I see what you did here. Chris Johnson. Dominik Robinson played wide receiver until 2020 before switching to edge. He's 6'4", ran a 4.7. I'm aware of his size and speed. Besides special teams, wouldn't be awesome to see a rotational defensive player as a potential red zone target. Look, listen, we've seen stuff like that in the past. Remember J.J. Watt used to get in on offense in the red zone for the Texans? I think he had like 3 or 4 touchdowns one year as a weapon. You never know, right? These play callers get creative nowadays. So I know Robinson's a great athlete. He's got good size. He's got good speed. So, hey, I'm curious to see what he does. I like the value in the 5th round. Bears Forever saw Bleacher Report's this is a 2023 mock, I think is what you meant to say, and we took Pitt wide receiver Jordan Addison. Do you like him or Jaxon Smith-Njigba better? Well, let me first say this. We're live on Tuesday answering your questions, depending on where you're watching this. Jordan Addison has entered the transfer portal, so we'll see where he plays, but just talking about the player itself, and yeah, USC, a lot of buzz there. If you're watching this later in the week, maybe he's already there. He had a great year at Pitt. 100 catches, almost 1,600 yards, 17 touchdowns, 16 yards a catch. We've talked about Smith-Njigba a couple times. He is special. Reigns from Rockwall, Texas, which is not too far from where we are in Dallas, Texas. He had 1,600 yards and 9 touchdowns himself, 17 yards a catch, a long of 75. His Rose Bowl against Utah was one of the single greatest receiving performances I have seen in the history of college football. I love both of these guys, and I think both could be top 10 picks next year. And if the Bears get one of them to pair with Darnell Mooney, that would be absolutely fantastic. Now pick a receiver. Type JA for Jordan Addison. Type JSN for Jaxon Smith-Njigba. I'd probably lean Smith-Njigba because there's at least some overlap with Justin Fields, although he didn't do much as a freshman when Fields was there, but they know each other. Either one's great, though. They're both going to be really good pros. Sangray is back. How about we tank this year and draft Bryce Young? Look, if Justin Fields is flat out terrible this year, and it's not on the personnel around him, it's not on the play calling, if that becomes obvious, then sure, in theory, drafting a quarterback could happen next year. I don't think it's going to. I think they're going to give Fields 2 years because I think they'll be bigger spenders next year. I think Fields is going to grow this year, play much better. But I'll never say never, Sangray Kim. If they're 2-15 and have the number 1 pick, that would obviously throw a wrench into things. Muhammad Omar, how many passing yards do you think Justin Fields will have? I think if you're between 3,500 and 4,000, that's a really good number. Probably closer to 35 with 500 or 600 rushing yards. That'd be a great season if he plays all 17 games. 3,500 passing, 600 rushing, 25-plus total touchdowns in year 2. I think I'd be pretty pumped up about that. Scott Osborne, what are the chances the Bears sign linebacker Hutchinson? I think you mean Hitchens, Anthony Hitchens. I'd say one to two Smoking Jays. I think it's a possibility. He visited Hallis Hall, so I would not rule that out by any stretch of the imagination. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel because we publish videos every single day, sometimes multiple videos per day. We've had a ton of big videos recently that you should go check out, including our draft grades, undrafted free agent tracker where we take a look at the players the Bears have signed, plus we broke down Nick Foles getting released, producer Jack in shambles, and some post-NFL draft free agent targets for the Chicago Bears. Check all those videos out and more, youtube.com/BearsNow. We've been plugging out content like crazy over the past couple of weeks. Bailey, what's our record looking like for this year? Well, for one, the schedule comes out May 12th, so I'm curious to see what the week-by-week schedule looks like. We'll, of course, have a video for that. Number two, without looking at that schedule, I will simply say, is this a 7-10 football team right now? Easier schedule, but, the roster is not ready to contend this year. I like something like that, 7-10, 8-9, maybe a little better, a little worse, somewhere in there. Sam Russo, the Bears signed Jarvis Landry, 2 years, $20 million. Would you accept that? $10 million a year is a little high for him at this point, but I'd probably get on board because I think he'd help Justin Fields. He's a good player still. He's not explosive. He's not one of these deep threat guys, but all your other receivers have good speed, so maybe you just need a guy who can work the underneath and intermediate routes. Michael Anderson, should we trade a first-round pick for Debo, or should we take a chance on Jarvis Landry? Well, they're not going to trade a first for Debo. I think that's pretty clear. So I guess Landry's your other option. Could you get him for like $8 million per year? 10's a little high. Could you get him for 2 years and $16 million, 1 year, $8 million? That would intrigue me. Who's going to win the NFC North in 2022? Type GB if you think it'll be the Green Bay Packers. Again. Type CHI if you think it'll be the Chicago Bears. Type MIN if you think it'll be the Minnesota Vikings. Or type DET if you think it's going to be the Detroit Lions. Ian Mitchell, sign OBJ. He will help us. I don't know when he's going to be healthy. If he's going to be ready to go by October, I would be on board. But if it's November or later, does it really make sense to sign him? Not sure. DC Viper, will the 2023 draft be the best draft for Chicago, or do you think they will find a way to mess it up? Their track record speaks for itself. We'll see, right? New regime, so we can't really sit here and say Ryan Poles has a track record of screwing it up because it's way too early to determine if he has screwed anything up. But, yeah, over time there's certainly been some hits, some misses. That's true with all teams, but some teams have done better than others. We'll see how the Bears stack up in the draft next year. Sager Galani, Pickens and Dean were right there, SMH. Dean has medical issues. I think the Bears made it clear in the draft they didn't value linebacker in the draft. Pickens was there, but, maybe they had concerns about his rumored red flags. They stuck to their board. I think that's what they did. Emilio DeLeon, glad we fixed the secondary. If we didn't, Fields would have to drop 30-plus a game to keep up and always play from behind. That's the thing, guys. The Bears gave up the most passing touchdowns last year. Their secondary needed work. You signed Tavon Young. I think he'll start at nickel. You drafted Jaquan Brisker and Kyle Gordon. They're both going to start. That's 3 new starters that the Bears have added on defense. So, you couldn't just ignore the secondary like Ryan Pace did last year when he cut Kyle Fuller and did nothing to replace him. The Bears have actually replaced him now, finally. Aaron Shumleffel, do you think we have interest in Fisher for the offensive line? I'd like to hope so. He remains unsigned. He was okay last year. Gave up 8 sacks. That's a high number. But it was his first season off the Achilles. So I think we have to acknowledge that. I think he will be better. This year, coming off, a full year removed from that Achilles, I think he'd probably be a better option than Larry Borom, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the Bears feel differently. Couple more here. Sengray Kim, why didn't we sign Justin Ross? The Chiefs stole him. I don't know. You'd have to ask Ryan Poles. But, the Chiefs were able to bring him. He's obviously also got medical concerns, and he's pretty slow, and the Bears don't want slow receivers. Follow me on Instagram. It's at HGramNFL, at HGramNFL. And then we've got one more super chat to get to end this mailbag. But if you didn't get your question answered on the show, you can DM me at HGramNFL. I'm always posting about the Bears on a daily basis. Jaxo23, I think the Bears will win the division because the national media has said this division is weak and not competitive, and the other divisions have more competition. They might win the division. I'd be surprised, but I do think the Packers have gotten worse. We'll see if the Bears can stack up with them in Minnesota.